so obvious between our last two speakers. Why don't you both take a moment to introduce yourselves?
My name is Kenneth. I'm the Field Operations Manager for Yes on 3 to prevent animal cruelty. When I say field operations, that means I'm in charge of all of our door knocking. So if anyone has ever knocked on your door and bothered you while you're watching the Pats game on a Sunday, I apologize. We have a lot of volunteers out there in Worcester and Millbury and Auburn knocking on doors every weekend. But I want to thank you, Matt, and everyone for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Good evening. My name is Brian Klippenstein. I'm working on the campaign entitled Citizens Against Food Tax Injustice. We're urging a no on question 3. I am burdened by, geographically, I'm from Missouri. I'm a campaign manager. She is from Medford, but I have a farming background from Missouri, and I'm executive director of a nonprofit that works for food security issues, and the nonprofit is called Protect the Harvest. So thank you for having us, and thank you for being tolerant for
Well, we knew you weren't from here because you said Medford, not Medford. So.
Betrayed already.
All right, I'm going to do a similar format to what we did in the first question. I'm going to throw out an idea here. By trying to ban certain types of farming in a certain way to raise animals for food, is this I guess I'll say a step to one, to kind of close down the family farm because it's going to become too expensive to raise animals in the way that a lot of regulations are trying to go, and 2, isn't really going to raise dramatically the cost of food, unfortunately. So, go ahead.
Sure. Well, first off, Brian, thanks for pointing the mic towards me. For those who can't see, there are 2 signs in all caps right here that say use the mic. So we're going to use the mic. So to answer the 2 questions that you gave to me. So first, more than 100 family farms have endorsed a yes vote on question 3 because they know that the extreme confinement of farm animals is not only bad for animals, it's also bad for public health. The Center for Food Safety has endorsed whoops, there we go. Now much louder, I'm going to step back a little bit.
No, I'll turn down the volume.
There we go.
There we go.
All right, so like I was saying, more than 100 family farmers have endorsed a yes vote on question 3. Additionally, more than 500 veterinarians have endorsed a yes vote because they agree that the extreme confinement of farm animals is bad for animal welfare. It's also bad for public health. The American Association of Avian Pathologists, in their journal, which I'm sure many of you subscribe to and read on a consistent basis, said that when animals are confined, more specifically chickens are confined in cages, they have higher rates of salmonella when compared to cage-free facilities. And so when it comes to farmers, we've found that most farmers that we talk to support question 3. They want it to pass. And then when it comes to the cost issue, so my opponent Brian here, he may point to a study done by Cornell, but it wasn't actually a study. It was a paper that our opposition paid for. But we keep citing a penny per egg because that is what the egg industry says itself. The Coalition for a Sustainable Egg Supply put out a report a year ago and said that it would cost about a penny per egg. And so this is a common sense proposal that simply just ensures that farm animals need at least enough space to be able to stand up, lie down, and extend their limbs. And in the case of chickens, extend their wings. It's nothing more, nothing less. It just ensures that farm animals need to be able to at least turn around, lie down, and extend their limbs.
So on your 2 questions, among others who are opposing this is the Massachusetts Farm Bureau, which has 6,000 members. Why am I here from Missouri? If this were a proposal to regulate farming only in Massachusetts, we would largely consider it none of our business. But this is a brand new model of regulation that's come to Massachusetts, first arriving in California. where the attempt is to regulate production across the country from coastal places that, in this case, the Humane Society think they can find compliant voters. This was first done in California on eggs, where they said they passed a ballot proposal which regulated producers in the state, and it passed. And the first thing that they recognized when they had, because they have a very large egg-producing industry in California, is, good grief, with these new standards, we cannot compete with the rest of the country. So then they partnered with the Humane Society and passed a law saying no eggs can be sold in California unless it meets the same standard. Now, this might be one of the groups that cares about the constitutional issues associated here with Article 1, Section 8, where interstate commerce is the authority of the federal government to regulate, probably for this very reason. And that, again, is the reason we are here, because it's important to note that California has an egg housing standard. The Humane Society has negotiated agreements with retailers that have a different standard. The Humane Society has proposed yet another different standard, a different one at the federal level, and this here in Massachusetts is a fourth standard. And here in Massachusetts, not only do they have a different egg standard, they've added pork. So as an outfit that cares about food security and believes that productivity actually matters in a troubled and hungry world, we see where this is going. California, Massachusetts, different products, different standards, which states are next, which standards are next, which animals are next, what's the cost. And so Kenny and I, of course, we do disagree on the costs. There's, what do they say, a penny an egg, that's what I'm saying, and I'm sticking to it. Now, Kenny's right that it was an industry estimate back in 2007 that said, I suspect, they said it would be about a penny an egg. Why we would care about a study in 2007 when we have real data on what actually happened in California should tell you a little bit of something about how sometimes these things can get deceptive. We can talk a little bit more about the price when we have our longer period of time, but suffice it to say that the United States Department of Agriculture numbers that track these things daily show that there is now a price spread between California and the rest of the country that used to be 16%, it's now 90%. So I'll get back a little more of that if that's responsive to your question, and we can start that.
That's fine. I just had one little thing I'd like to throw in. The two of you, and actually one of the thoughts just came up because of what you both said. With many states doing their different regulations, one can easily see the problems that are going to arise. Because some states have the ability to raise certain type animals successfully, and other states, because climates are different. So, should not, if regulations like this eventually need to come out, which I think that there should be some, there should be some standardization, shouldn't it be looked at more as a uniform code across the United States versus individuals?
No. Thanks. So in 2011, there was an attempt to set a national standard for the welfare of egg-laying chickens. And it didn't pass, and so it went back to the states. And so that's why we're urging a yes vote on question 3. But this isn't anything new. Like Brian mentioned, in 2008, voters overwhelmingly passed Proposition 2 in California, 63 to 37% in support of higher animal welfare standards. But it's not just California, it's not just Massachusetts, where we have a 66% lead right now. It's also red states like Arizona, where in the early 2000s, we worked on a ballot measure that phased out the extreme confinement of some animals. It's not exactly what we're doing here, but in a red state like Arizona, again, it passed overwhelmingly. And then also in swing states like Florida. Because we see that wherever people are in the country, they agree that farm animals deserve at least to be able to stand up, lie down, and turn around and extend their limbs. Right now, it's still legal in Massachusetts to lock up animals in cages so small they can barely move an inch. And so that's why we're urging a yes vote on question 3. And I think we have very high support because most people agree this is a modest, common sense proposal. I hear that every day when I knock on doors and talk to voters.
Brian?
Right. Yeah. That's our concern. And just a bit of context. This is a number that's widely supported, but it came from a senior official at the World Wildlife Fund who said we have to grow the same amount of food in the next 30 years as we've grown in the previous 8,000. And we're one of the few countries in the whole world that produces a surplus. Not only do we feed ourselves, but we grow enough extra to share both through sales and through charitable giving in our U.S. food aid programs abroad. So again, productivity matters, and if we're going to go state by state to muck things up, all we're going to do is frustrate that effort, and the consequences are going to be absolutely tragic. Now, in fairness to Kenny and his bunch, they tried to go to Washington to get a uniform national standard. But Washington, for all its flaws, can stumble into considering things that are evidence-based. You do get to hear all sides of the story. And because they move so slowly, if at all, they get a lot of time to think about it and hear about it, and they get to hear from officials inside of government, outside of government. And when the Humane Society went to Washington with their proposal, they were joined by the big egg industry. And we got asked often, well, how can you oppose something that these separate interests both agree on? And my answer always was, well, who wasn't at the table? No one representing 330 million consumers were at the table. And these guys just got together and decided that they would pat each other on the back at the end of the day and send all of us the bill. So that's why it didn't pass at the federal level. So Kenny and his group, and I give them credit, it's very innovative. It's an effective way to force the change that they want by going to compliant states, or ones they perceive to be compliant, and trying to impose regulatory burdens on the production of food that ultimately, and I'll just make this note, we're always saying, well, you guys are here for big agriculture. It's one of the charges against us at this moment in the campaign I wish were true. You know why? Because they're not there and we don't have their money. Kenny's outfits raised $1.8 million. We're about 1/6 of that because we don't have big agriculture's money. Why? Well, this is a fight they're sick of having, but they're also realize that, of course, we can pass these costs on to consumers, so why fight it? And that's, the bigger they are, the more they are that way.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Why don't you give us 5 or 6 minutes on your side, and then we'll switch mics again.
Sure, thank you. So I just want to briefly address some of the points that Brian made, and then I'll give my pitch again. So Brian, you had mentioned that voters, consumers, 330 million Americans, didn't have a seat at the table with this national bill that we worked on a few years ago. But the other day I read an article in which you said that voters shouldn't be able to decide on farm animal welfare in the state of Massachusetts. But I think they do. Again, I talk to voters all day. It's what I do. I knock on doors, I make phone calls, I explain the issue, and I often explain both sides to see what people's questions or concerns are. And almost universally, people agree that farm animals deserve better than extreme confinement and that we deserve better food safety standards. Again, the studies that I'm referencing aren't from us. They are from the egg industry. They are from the experts. And the study that I was referencing, you had said it came out in 2007. It's actually 2015. It was the Coalition for a Sustainable Egg Supply. And so I want to make sure that you all have the facts straight and when these studies came out. So going back to the issue and why we are urging a yes vote on question 3. I think most of us in this room maybe have never seen, maybe you've seen on the internet, how farm animals are actually treated when they're extremely confined. So I'll just briefly go through each animal, and I also have handouts that I'll give out after this so you can see a visual. In the case of egg-laying chickens, they are crammed 6 or 7 in a cage so small each cannot flap her wings. They eat, sleep, drink, and defecate in the same space for a year and a half where eggs are laid for human consumption. In the case of breeding sows, they're confined in crates that are so narrow they can't turn around in a circle. Animal welfare experts have compared it to forcing humans to live in an airline seat for his or her entire life. I mean, could you imagine that? Being stuck in an airline seat, you can't get up and go to the laboratory, you can't get off the plane, you can't walk up and down the aisles to stretch. You're stuck in this crate for 4 months at a time, virtually your entire life. And lastly, in the case of calves raised for veal, they are confined in wooden crates, again, where they are so narrow they can't turn around, they're tethered at the neck for 4 months until they're sent to slaughter. And a yes vote on question 3 simply ensures that these animals can stand up, lie down, extend their limbs. And I know I keep repeating myself, but I think it's important to clarify just how simple and modest this proposal is. And when it comes to cost, a lot of the major food retailers and food businesses are already moving in this direction. And they are doing it without raising their prices. In fact, McDonald's, I think we can all agree, is probably the most cost-conscious company in this entire country, said that they are going cage-free and they're not raising their products at all. Additionally, Taco Bell is going to be completely cage-free by the end of the year. They are not raising their prices. And so I think there's a picture being painted here that there's going to be an apocalypse if we give farm animals enough space to turn around. But it's just not true. Again, a similar law was passed in California by the ballot, just like we're trying to do here in Massachusetts. And in California, if you look at the egg prices, they are comparable to the rest of the country. And they fluctuate. They're an agricultural product. They fluctuate month to month. Earlier this summer, they were below the national average. And so it changes. But going back to what we're talking about here, this is simply a measure to prevent animal cruelty and improve food safety. That's why more than 100 farmers, more than 500 vets, as well as the Center for Food Safety, the NSPCA, the Animal Rescue League of Boston, all are urging a yes vote on question 3, and I hope you join us and vote yes as well. Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to ask any questions.
Thanks, Kenny. So the Coalition for Sustainable Egg Supply, I have their study in front of me, and this study, by the way, is typically condemned by the other side because it talks about the welfare issue that I'll get into for a second. But in it, it notes that the eggs that would be outlawed in this ballot question cost 36% less capital costs to produce. So what happened in California, and this isn't industry, this isn't me. These are headlines from news outlets here and there and around the country. When this went into effect January last year, and all these headlines are from December and January. This is what the headlines read after my opponent assured everyone that it would just cost a penny an egg. The headline reads, "Why California egg prices are skyrocketing." That's CNBC. Cage law blamed for skyrocketing egg prices in California. California's scrambled eggs. The state's new chicken coop law is hitting human beings hard. Breaking eggs in California. Another do-good scheme raises the price of protein crackers. Egg price disrupted in U.S. as cages made roomy. And that's a sampling of what we have. Now, there are numbers that the United States Department of Agriculture publishes, and you can't see it here, but I hold it up because it makes you all think that I have something here that's authentic. I actually do. But it's the daily price report, and the first thing you're going to notice is it's broken down in 2 pieces. It's the National Egg Price Report. I know this is, as someone from Missouri, I'm very impressed that Massachusetts has 2 agricultural issues on the ballot, this and marijuana. This may not be nearly as interesting as marijuana, but bear with me. You have a section with National Egg egg price report. And then they have since created a whole separate section just for California. They didn't just randomly pull this out. And we pulled the numbers from California. They were sent to us by USDA. They were put on a graph. And the average daily price spread has moved from 16% to 89.7% average over the course of this year. So cataclysmic, you're probably right, okay? But it's not a penny an egg, and it does matter, and it matters particularly if you're not someone like me who makes far more than the national average income. And the first thing I want to say is for any consumer who wants cage-free, organic, omega-3, free-range, all of the above, the beautiful part about our system of agriculture and our free market in this hopefully remaining free country is that you can go to the store and you can buy it. If you do the all of the above, it's going to cost $6, it's going to cost $8, that's fine. If everyone wanted to buy those eggs, that's all farmers would make.
Right.
At the moment, the reason why the outfit that's pushing this from Washington, D.C. is here is because 90% of consumers are making the wrong choice. There is a vote. I strongly support a vote. I support the vote at the checkout counter, where everybody gets to vote every time they shop. And Americans overwhelmingly, and the number is undisputed, it's 90%, they buy the conventional eggs, which this outfit is here to try to ban. I have pictures of signs in store windows in California that they went to the trouble of posting after this went into effect in California. Why are egg prices so high? To our valued customers, their egg shortages experiencing significant cost increases and the like. This is the picture of the daily price spread, the graph that's based on the USDA numbers that show them going up. But if you're one of these people that doesn't want to look at these numbers or care about them or you trust none of them, you can go to your store and look at the prices. You can go look at the cheapest priced eggs on the shelf, and you're going to find at Shop and Save yesterday in Everett, they were 89 cents a dozen. So then I went to find the very, very cheapest cage-free eggs, and they were $3.49 a dozen. And then all the prices go up from there. Here are the prices. It's a silly habit of mine. Every store I go to, I take pictures of egg prices.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's right. Just the facts. Yeah, just the facts. So, on the choice issue, we really think this is important. The Humane Society in this case is trying to win at the ballot what they've lost at the checkout counter. And so they're coming here to a place where you can go on the ballot, and yes, it's true. If you're trying to win something, the ballot is the right place to go because it's where the most money and the least information have the best chance of prevailing. And they did an outstanding job of collecting the signatures, managing the process, and drafting ballot language, which is most assuredly going to make polling troublesome from my side, and ultimately maybe the outcome troublesome on my side, because roughly it simply says, do you want to prevent cruelty to animals? And why it polls 68 instead of 100 is a bit of a mystery to me. Perhaps people do know the cost. But I just want to spend a minute or two talking about the other issue here. And that is, not only is this not free for consumers, but is this really free of unintended consequences for the animals we're trying to protect? Because having grown up in a farm and having watched the evolution of agriculture as they've been on this trajectory to where the United States of America produces and consumes 83 billion eggs. Are we going to do that in our backyards? Unlikely. When this country was formed 228 years ago, 90% of the country farmed. Now 1 to 2% of the people farm. We've got 330 million people almost. And we're trying to feed, as I said, a hungry and troubled world. So for years they've been trying to figure out how do we best keep animals productive? How do we protect them from disease and nutrition issues? And ultimately, even when you put them in barns, how do you protect them from each other? Little chickens, as intelligent as they can be and as lovable occasionally as they can be, they're not little Gandhis. Hogs are not big Gandhis. They can be very hard on each other. So there are a number of reasons which I could go into if you like, but on the one hand, it's good news for the animals if they have more space. It's bad news for the animals in terms of tripling the rate of mortality. It's bad for the animals in terms of not having them so that they can all enjoy individualized nutrition, because bullies get the food and the weaklings don't get the food. It's bad for food safety. You know, this is another point of he said. The Penn State University just did a study that was released 2 months ago that said, sorry, it's the small flocks that have more salmonella than the big guys. And if you go to one of these chicken places, you can. It's intuitive once you see it. There's one farm affected in Massachusetts, one and only one farm. They're here to get to the rest of the country, not to get to Massachusetts. There's only one farm, but if you go and you look at it, and Diane from Medford,
Good try.
and she looked at this, and she's a city gal, and she used to be homeless. She's been on public assistance. She's been a poverty advocate for 14 years. She's opposed to this food tax. She said, I get it. I said, what do you get? She said, the chickens here, you can't talk about agriculture without talking about blood and dirt, sorry, but the chickens here, they poop, and the poop goes down 6 to 8 inches underneath the cage. It's whisked away. The egg comes down here. The outside birds lay eggs, in many cases, the same place they poop. They live in the same place they poop. They kick up the dirt and the dust, and you have air issues. You have worker safety issues. But, you know, you just have to ask at the beginning, why did farmers put them in the barns in the first place? It was not to punish them. You don't know me well enough to believe me, but I'm partly in this debate because I got tired of hearing my family and my neighbors badmouth for not caring about their animals. I can assure you they do. And if you spent several days in these barns, you would understand why they wanted to get them out of the outside, out of the weather, away from the disease, away from the predators. And there's one last thing I want to share with you. And this just arrived in the New York Times today. So we're talking about caged eggs versus cage-free eggs, and Kenny did an outstanding job of describing in as dramatic a fashion as you could what it would be like to be a caged animal. Another animal rights outfit took video footage in California of horrible living conditions for chickens, except that the house that they've been filming, the houses they've been filming are cage-free. And just some excerpts from this. It says, advocates are now asking whether the conditions for cage-free chickens are better. The videos they took show birds on the floor, injured hens, pecked by other chickens. One bird had a piece of flesh hanging off its beak. The video focuses on a particular hen named Ella. When the organization found her in the cage-free barn, she was struggling to pull herself up, had lost most of her feathers, her back was covered in feces. These birds were rotting on the floor, and there's one dead bird seemed to have lost her head. These were birds attacking birds, and the smell was horrible. Now, I'm not doubting that that's not real, but I'll just tell you the same thing that the American Vet Medical Association will tell you, is that it's hard getting animals to behave, and there are trade-offs with every system, and at the end of the day, the American Vet Medical Association says there is no one best way. You have to decide what trade-offs you want to accept.
Okay, well, there's actually one point that when I looked over the paperwork that was out there on this regulation that neither of you talked about, there is a section in there that allows a retailer to be fined for selling animals that or products from animals that violate this proposed regulation. And seeing as how there's not a major grocery store chain in New England, forget Massachusetts, that is owned in New England, a lot of them are owned internationally, okay? how do you, is that, one, has to raise the price of the food. Two, you know, you're gonna find the retailer when maybe they really don't know. I mean, of course, it says in here, well, if they do it knowingly, well, to what degree are they gonna have to do research to find out if it's knowingly? And then if you look at small grocery chains, I think right in this area, we get like a Parkin Shop, I think, and Big Bunny or something like that. I think they each have like 3 stores. Well, they're buying from like a brokerage service. And those eggs are coming from all different places, so, and the meats. So again, how do you, the fine here for the retailer, which is obviously gonna it's just gonna drive prices up in my opinion, but how do you two answer that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. So like you said, the law says that if a retailer knowingly sells products from animals who were intensively confined in cages, then there is a fine. And you have to have a fine because there has to be some way to hold retailers accountable. They have to obey the law somehow. But the way that they would know is that distributors would have to sign an affidavit certifying that it's compliant with the law. It's that simple. If they don't get the affidavit, then they're doing it unknowingly. It's really that simple.
Yes. So, you know, the enforcement authority goes to the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts. And I agree with Kenny's description of how the process works. How it works in the end, if there is a affidavit or that's provided that may not be accurate, in my own head, I'm trying to imagine the Attorney General sending their staff to Indiana and Iowa and Oklahoma, running around chicken barns trying to find out whether they're compliant or not. Perhaps they would, and perhaps it would work, or perhaps they just let it go and hope it works out best. But I'll just say in closing that Massachusetts Retailers Association is formally opposed to question 3. They have 3,600 members, and it's for some of the same concerns that you mentioned, as well as the idea that they're in the business of satisfying consumer choices who have their own values and their own pocketbooks. And you know, we've got 40,000 supermarkets in the United States of America. It's a blessing. And 40,000 choices, about 41,000 choices in each supermarket. A lot of places you can go to in the world where they've never even heard of such a thing.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you both very much. We appreciate your time.